Knyaz-Borissova gradina. Knyaz-Borissova Gradina Park is the oldest and largest park in Sofia. Today it occupies an area of over 3,300 dekas, located at the heart of the city. The larger and more remarkable part of the park is a forest, 2,300 dekas, where most of the trees are of an average age of 110 years. The park was initiated by a decision of the Sofia City Council in 1882, establishing the development of a nursery for decorative tree species and shrubs called pipinera on the land of the existing municipal pasture. The same year, the Swiss gardener Daniel Neff was appointed to take care of the new nursery and maintain the space around it. He developed the first plan of the garden, set up the nursery at the lower part of the river, enclosed it with willows, and planted the first 10,000 small trees. Neff's pipinera was located at the place where today is the beautiful Lake Ariana. For 2 years, the area of the nursery had been increased by 14 dekas, and the area around it began to be called Rozsadna Gradina, seedling garden. Already in the first year of his work in the seedling garden, next to the house near the nursery where he was accommodated, Neff built a small pond and planted the first oak tree in the park. This oak tree can be seen today. It is located next to the central lane from Ariana Lake. In 1886, the garden grew from the house to the east, and the children's playground, which still exists, was established. 2 years later, there was a second extension, again eastward to the Fish Lake, now known as the Lily Lake. The two central alleys were formed at that time, and more valuable species, oak, ash, sycamore, and birch, were being planted in the garden. The first few dozen oaks were brought from the Lozanets forest. In the next 3 to 4 years, deciduous tree species brought from Passerelle and Kokalani forests were planted in large numbers. By 1890, from Rila Mountain were brought considerable quantities of coniferous species, black pine and spruce. Exotic species such as redwood, cedar and ginkgo biloba were planted. Today, one can dive into this ambience, strolling along the lane of the ancient oaks. In 1892, on the initiative of Professor Bachvarov, the first professor in astronomy at the university, started the construction of the Astronomical Observatory of Sofia University. It was completed in 1894, 30 years before laying the foundations of the university's main building. The University Astronomical Observatory is one of the first observatories on the Balkans. On January the 9th, 1895, in honour of the Crown Prince Boris, then marking 1 year, the pepinera received its official name, Knyaz-Borissova Gradina. By the end of the century, the nursery was bringing significant revenue to the municipality from the sale of saplings and flowers. In 1890, the garden was decorated with a small pond, made by the main entrance, today Orloff Most, Eagle's Bridge, with many flowers planted around. The small pond existed as such until 1895, when it was drained, and 4 years later was built anew. It was expanded to its present size, lining was made and an islet was built in it. After the reconstruction, the lake became 175 metres long and 50 metres wide. That same winter, in 1904, it began to be used for ice skating. In 1906, the Alsatian Joseph Fry, a passionate admirer of flowers, was appointed as chief gardener of Sofia. He reorganized Borissova Gradina according to his own plan, further developing the one of Neff. In 1910 to 1912, Fry planted the two main alleys in the lower part of the garden, the linden and chestnut one, and opened the wide central and two side alleys in the upper part, from the children's playground to the fish lake. The rosarium was created after his idea, and annual flower exhibitions started to be organized. Bust monuments of prominent Bulgarians have been placed in the garden since 1920. The first was Ivan Vazov, on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the writer. Gradually, the number of busts grew and included some of the most famous Bulgarian patriots, such as Vasil Levski, Hristo Botev, Georgy Rakovsky, Marin Drinov, and many others. Today, the number of bust monuments exceeds 40, making the park one of the largest outdoor memorials in the country. Around 1930, in the middle of the fish lake, next to the frogs and turtles, was placed a sculpture in the shape of a stone lily, from which flow spurts of water. About 10 years later, a new sculpture, decoration of the lake, was made once again. In the centre, surrounded by the famous turtles and frogs, a figure of bathing children was placed, designed by the sculptor Vasil Zidorov. Already in the first year of his work as municipal gardener, Joseph Fry turned the then Knyaz-Boris Tarnovsky garden into a magnificent park, which in beauty and spaciousness competed with the palace parks near Varna and Vranja. His work was continued in the next, third period of the park development, which began with the appointment of the Bulgarian gardener Georgy Dutev. As a graduate of the Austrian School of Horticulture, he paid special attention to the spatial structure of the park. Meadows were formed in the forest as well as landscape views, with which he gave the park an artistic expression. In 1934, he reconstructed the neglected rosarium and planted 1,400 roses delivered from Germany. A crucial point in shaping the newly built areas in the garden is the construction of the Japanese corner above the fish lake towards Tsarigrad Road. The Japanese corner was created in 1940, and the plants, predominantly Japanese cherry trees, were sent by the Japanese envoy, plenipotentiary Hachiya, as a sign of friendship between the Japanese and Bulgarian people. In the second half of the 20th century, in the Boris Garden were built children's playgrounds, summer stadiums and theatre, summer reading space, tennis courts, monuments and equestrian sites. After September 9, 1994, a new period in the development of the garden began. The name was changed to Park of Freedom. It acquired the status of a park for culture and recreation. In 1952 began the construction of the Rock Garden. On June 2, 1956, the huge anti-fascist monument, Bratska Mogila, Brothers' Mound, was erected and shaped as a large architectural sculptural composition over which rises a 41-metre-high obelisk. At the beginning of 1992, the park reverted to its original name, Knyaz-Borissova Garden, or briefly Borisova Garden as we call it today. The park is home to 65 species of birds, the most typical of them, such as jay, green woodpecker, blackbird, grosbeak, titmouse, song thrush, etc., can be found in the Birds Alley. The red squirrel is also among its typical inhabitants. Friendly and playful, it has a year-round fluffy tail, which, besides distinguishing it from other species, helps it to fly between the trees. Nowadays, the park is very popular with Sofia residents and guests of the city. On weekends and warm days, the number of park visitors exceeds 10,000.